Hello, this is Dale Ingram from Speaking Truth Love Ministries. And this is our end time series. We're going to be primarily today in Revelation chapter 17 and 18, talking about the fall of Mystery Babylon. But before I get into chapter 17, a couple of things that I want to go back to the end of chapter 16 we looked at last week. And I want you to see the flow. I want you to see the chronology of how this is taking place, because chapters 17 and 18 is a close-up view, a detailed description of God's anger at Mystery Babylon and his wrath and judgment. So I want you to see the chronology before we get into looking at chapter 17 and 18. So in chapter 16, verse 12, so I'm going to start reading. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates. Its waters dried up, so that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. So the obvious countries there, China. Remember, all of the nations of the world are united at this point. There's been a one world government now for almost 3.5 years, and they're united. But these three unclean spirits go out, demonic spirits go out to bring in all the nations, and God dries up the Euphrates River to allow them to come. But then the demonic spirits go out and entice them to come. Verse 13, and I saw three unclean spirits like frogs going out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and the whole world. Okay, so not just the kings of the east, right? The whole world. To gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. So over half the earth's population has been wiped out. Over 4 billion people gone. And who knows how many are left at this point. But the remaining armies, the remaining people of the nations, the armies are going to come. Satan's bringing them there. God's bringing them there because God's going to judge them in the land of Israel again. Similar to the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38-39. So logistically, that's going to take some time. Certainly, weeks, a few months. It's not going to be long. These are all pretty much rapid fire judgments, these bold judgments. This particular one will involve some time because you have to get the armies there, physically there. So certainly weeks, a few months, but they will be coming in as God is gathering them there. In verse 15, behold, I am coming as a thief. Blessed is he who watches, keeps his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place called in the Hebrew Armageddon. Okay, so we went over all of that last week. So the armies of the world are coming to Armageddon. Now picture that for a minute. Hundreds of millions, no doubt, of soldiers are once again pressing into the Middle East, pressing into the land of Israel. That's when the seventh bowl judgment is poured out. So all the chaos from the seventh bowl judgment takes place as these armies are gathering into Israel. And remember, Jesus Christ, at this point, on his way, right, on the white horse, which we'll see in just a second, because we're going to jump to Revelation 19, verse 11 for just a minute. But verse 17 first. Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air. A loud voice came out of the temple from heaven, from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, a great earthquake, such a mighty and great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. So even worse than the one under the seal judgments takes place. So the armies are gathering, they're pressing into the Middle East, and this massive earthquake hits. Now the great city, which this is a reference to Jerusalem, was divided into three parts because of the earthquake and the shifting of the earth. And the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon was remembered. Now you see those words, great Babylon was remembered. when we look at chapter 17 and 18 and we see a detailed description of Babylon's destruction, but this is where it happens. It was also announced earlier, the end of chapter 14, the angel flying through the air, one of the angels was proclaiming the destruction of Babylon. But here we have the place it happens, and the seventh bowl is poured out as the armies are pressing into the land of Israel. Massive earthquakes, the cities of the nations fall, and great Babylon is remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Every island fled away, the mountains were not found. Great hail from heaven fell upon men, each hailstone about the weight of a talent. Men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, since the plague was exceedingly great. When this is taking place, Christ is on his way in the heavens, on his white horse already, with the armies of heaven behind him. He is coming in the clouds. Turn over to chapter 19 for just a minute and go down to verse 11, because this is the chronology. It's going to go right from that seventh bowl to Christ coming. And John says in verse 11, now I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood. His name is called the Word of God. The armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. So that entourage, that massive parade through the heavens, is on its way to earth as the seventh bowl is being poured out. Christ is about to put his feet on the Mount of Olives, which we learned from the Old Testament, which we'll look at later. But that's the chronology. That's the flow of this. And I'm going to get into more details later. But let's go back to chapter 17, verse 1, because God's going to give us a close-up view of the destruction of Babylon. It's interesting. We only have 22 books, 22 chapters in the book of Revelation. But two of them, God spends on a detailed description of who is Mystery Babylon and why God's so furious with them, and why God pours his wrath out on them, and how God pours his wrath out on them. 2 chapters. And so that's what we're going to take a look at today. So verse 17, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me. So it's interesting. John sees these scenes, and throughout the book of Revelation, remember the four living creatures come to him in the seal judgments. He said, they say, come and see. Come and see, come and see. And the angels come and talk with him. So he's very much involved as he's watching this stuff in heaven. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying unto me, come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me in the spirit in the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So here's this beast again. Now, this particular beast we see first of all in Daniel 7. Then we see the beast again in Revelation 12, Revelation 13, and then we see it again here. Now we get more details here in these chapters about this beast. So it says that in verse 4, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. So whatever city this is, and I know there's a lot of debate, I lean towards that Mystery Babylon is Rome. I think there's a good possibility that the original Babylon, someplace in the land of Shinar, someplace there in modern day Iraq, Satan has a special plan there. and whether that original city is going to be rebuilt. There's an Old Testament passage that's very interesting that we'll take a look at that talks about the prophecies of basket with a woman in the basket, and the woman represents wickedness, and there's a lead cover put over her, and that basket's being carried to the land of Shinar, and the prophets, asking about that, and it's being taken to this land of Shinar, which is the general area where Tower of Babel was, the city of Babylon was built, and there's something about that that's intriguing to me, and it said that there is a place or a base that is being built or constructed, and when that's built, this woman that's referred to as wickedness is set on its base or set on its place. And I'm wondering if some of that is going to be, the open idol worship. Some of these idols in the Old Testament where people actually had human sacrifices, babies being offered. I'm wondering if that's not going to be reinstated in the 7 years in the second half. Satan would love nothing more than to have this wickedness openly going on. Remember, the image of the beast halfway through is in the holy place of all places. So Satan has different places on the earth that have significance to him. And obviously the temple, he's there where God's presence is supposed to be. So, Satan wants to be like God. He wants to be worshiped. But then I wouldn't be surprised, whatever this is that's happening in the Old Testament with this woman that represents wickedness being taken to the land of Shinar, something's going to be there. And whether the old city of Babylon is going to be rebuilt, and then something like the Tower of Babel put up an idol there, and there's going to be perhaps human sacrifices, whatever's going to take place. Maybe there's references here to both Mystery Babylon and the ancient Babylon. Maybe there's room for both of those in this. But anyways, back to chapter 17. John's watching this scene. He sees the woman and he sees this dragon. The woman is arrayed in all this apparel. But verse 5 says, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. There's something about this city. And this woman is the city, which we'll see in a few minutes, that reigns over the kings of the earth. Another reason why I lean towards it's Rome, and possibly connected, with the Vatican and Rome, and the Vatican has powerful influence over many, billions of people on the earth. Somehow it's all intertwined. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. Now, John says, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. We've all probably seen somebody drunk, and their body movements are erratic and crazy and out of control, that kind of thing. There's something about this woman who's arrayed in gorgeous apparel, bright apparel, decked with gold and all of that, but she's drunk. But what is she drunk with? It says drunk with the blood of the saints. Drunkenness is excess, right? You drink beer, wine, whatever, liquor till you're drunk. You're out of control. And this woman is drunk with the blood of the saints. Now, look at it close, because this is another reason why I think it's referring to Rome. In Jesus' day, thousands upon thousands of saints were slain in the city of Rome. The Jews are the first ones, the Jewish leaders, Saul being one of them, one of the first ones to start persecuting the church was Saul himself, who later gets saved and changed his name to Paul. But then pretty soon Rome gets in on the act, and Rome starts killing Christians. And Nero, one of the worst. And you read Fox's Book of Martyrs, and it was horrible, horrible stuff that they did. And they brought the believers in to entertain the people of Rome, and the emperors and the rulers were entertained by watching the animals in the arenas literally tear, people to pieces, and burned them at the stake, crucified them, did all kinds of horrific stuff. Rome was drunk with the blood of the saints. Mystery Babylon here is drunk with the blood of the saints. And I think that there's going to be a repeat in the 7 years of tribulation, especially in the second half. There's martyrs in the first half. We see it under the fifth seal judgment in chapter 6. But there are several massive waves of persecution. But in the second half, I think that a lot of these Jews and Christians that are captured, many of them are going to be taken by the millions. Okay, so not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, by the millions. Believers, people that get saved during the 7 years, and Jews that are captured as well, are going to be taken to this particular city and once again slaughtered. And so we see the city drunk with the blood of the saints. And let's go down a little bit farther. So John says that he marveled when he sees this sight, but the angel, verse 7, said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her." Now, the woman's referred to as Mystery Babylon because that's the name, the title given her. But the angel said, "I will tell you the mystery." Now, that seems to me that means that what the angel is going to tell John makes it clear who the woman is or who the city is. And again, let's read a little bit farther here. "I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast who carries her, which has the 7 heads, 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit." So we think that that's a specific reference to the individual, the Antichrist, that receives the deadly wound, appears to be dead, appears to come back to life, and then the false prophet tells the world we need to make an image to the beast, we need to worship this beast. And again, I think this is Satan trying to mimic the resurrection of Christ, right? The resurrection of the true Messiah, and but the world's going to buy it, and they're going to believe this person was killed, come back to life, so we're going to worship him, but he's God, kind of thing. And so the angel is describing what's happening. Verse 8, "The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world." So the unbelievers are going to be so captivated by this that they're going to buy it, hook, line, and sinker. It says, "When they see the beast that was and is not and yet is." So it convinces the millions of people left that are not saved, that they are convinced this is God or this is the Christ, the Messiah. And by the way, fascinating things are happening in the news today. And the 20 living hostages got released, which is amazing. And they got some of the bodies of the deceased hostages back. But keep an eye on these Abraham Accords and everything that's happening. And I was also watching a thing on Sling and Stone. And if you're into the end time stuff and you want to watch some videos, go on YouTube and look up Sling and Stone. I forget the young man's name that does that. but he had a video on I was watching today where someone is watching this comet or this object that now, some people are openly saying it's not like a regular comet, it's behaving differently. And important people are saying, this is an alien ship from the center of our galaxy. But the one guy that was really interesting in the video that I was watching was talking about, and this was an unsaved guy, right? This is just a secular guy, but he was talking about this comet that's coming, and there's two different things up there now, and the second one's going to be here. The first one, I think, is in 2027. The one that we're talking about, that I'm talking about now, is the one that's going to get here in 2029, and he was actually going on about this thing that somehow it could bring peace to the earth because it's going to unify the earth. And he actually said it could be almost like a messianic age. I mean, really bizarre stuff. And it was also interesting what President Trump was saying about the Abraham Accords in the Middle East and this 20-point peace agreement, using the term eternal peace. And I get it. We want peace, and I'm not bashing President Trump, but it's just interesting how perfectly accurate the Bible is, right? I mean, thousands of years ago, God said, this is what's going to be in the last days. All the lawlessness will abound. We see it all over the place. But yet, when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction, the war, we're on the verge of war, and yet there's all this talk about peace, and we think we're going to get peace. Secular people talking about a messianic age because of something coming that they think might be aliens. I mean, it's all setting the stage for Satan to come onto the scene and deceive the world. And then at the end of the 7 years, Jesus Christ himself is going to come and set up his kingdom on this earth, and Satan's bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. All that stuff. It is about to happen. And no, we can't say it's going to be this year. We can't say it's going to be next year. But we are in the season. The Bible says you're not going to know the day or the hour, but you should know the season. It says we should not be in the dark, that Christ coming overtakes us like a thief. So all that stuff's going on. But now let's come back to here. Let's come back to this city, Mystery Babylon. And let's come back to the description of the beast that the woman is sitting on with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So it says, here is the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And again, the woman is the city which reigns over the kings of the earth. That's going to come in just a few minutes. So the city sits on 7 hills. I mean, everybody knows that is a term, a reference to Rome. That Rome sits on 7 hills. Now, I've read, explanations where people say, well, there's some other cities that could meet that description and, this or that. But the reality is, if you say the city on 7 hills, that historically people have understood that to be Rome. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. So the 7 heads represent the 7 mountains, but also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th and is of the 7. Now that's interesting. Think about that. The beast that receives the deadly wound and then comes back to life. So the Antichrist. It says is the 8th, but is of the 7. What does that mean? Is of the 7. Perhaps he's related. Perhaps he's a descendant of, or has a common ancestry to one of the other kings or some of the other kings. Could he be a clone? There's something about this character that's different from all the others. And whatever it is, it's going to cause him to stand out. And of course, then he receives a deadly wound and the world worships him. But it says here that he's of the seven, but he's going into perdition. The 10 horns, which you saw, are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. So these 10 kings are different than the seven, right? These 10 kings haven't received a kingdom as yet. So if you're thinking about, and I watch a lot of the videos about the end times and about these passages, there's a lot of people that speculate, the 10 kings are the 10 nations in the European Union. And yet, it clearly says here the 10 kings have received no kingdom as yet. So obviously, it's not President Trump, right? He hasn't, he's president twice here in the U.S. He's not talking about, people think about King Charles. Doesn't mean that some of these people might be key players in the tribulation, but King Charles is a king. And, Prince William, that when something happens to King Charles, he's going to step into that. There's other kings still recognized as kings in the world. Some people are leaning towards maybe these 10 kings are 10 oligarchs, people that have a tremendous amount of wealth. And by the way, did you guys see, I think it was just this last week, Elon Musk is the first person to ever reach $500 billion in wealth. Think about that, $500 billion. It wasn't that long ago that they were saying his wealth was like $162 billion or whatever, but it is incredible. And there are people that are saying, again, I'm not saying Elon Musk is, but there are people out there that are thinking maybe these are going to be 10 very powerful individuals, maybe with great wealth, maybe also, with this artificial intelligence, the people that manage to create and harness artificial general intelligence, and who knows if we're ever going to get to artificial super intelligence before Christ comes back, because I think we're talking about artificial intelligence. I do think that there's probably a line in the sand where God's going to say, okay, it's not going to go beyond this. You remember the Tower of Babel that I referred to a number of times? God said, when you're reading the account of that in the book of Genesis, you're reading the account of the Tower of Babel. And they're building a city, and then they're building a tower. And God says that if we leave them alone, nothing will be withheld from them. Now, God is not naive, right? God knows everything. And sometimes I think we as Christians, we have this almost a cartoonish view of some of this stuff. The story of Noah's Ark and the Tower of Babel, like this is some slime and mortar, and they're just building this tower. Whatever that was with the city and the tower, it was highly sophisticated and involved, obviously a great amount of coordination with Satan, with demons. They were doing things that were beyond what you and I can comprehend, and God doesn't go into detail in the scriptures about that. But if God says, if we leave them alone, nothing will be withheld from them. And I think, he confounds the language and the races, all of that stuff. Even I think the continents are separating at that point. But everything is converging again back to that. I think that same point. And when Satan gets the world to unite back together, he gets his one world government halfway through the 7 years. And with artificial intelligence, I think that there's a point here where God would say again, if we leave them alone, nothing will be withheld from them. So I think we are very rapidly getting to a point where God is going to take his children to safety and pour his judgment out. Is it going to be in a year or two? We don't know. Could be another few years yet. 5, 10 years. Can you imagine where this world's going to be? But it could be another 5 or 10 years. But whatever the case, you and I are sitting on, we have a front row seat to the end of the age. It's like being in the first seat of a really scary roller coaster, and you're up front. You're the first one to make it to the top and look down over. I mean, we are, as believers today, we are in a front row seat. All of these things are beginning to unfold in front of us. Now, again, I believe we get raptured out prior to the 7 years. So there's much of the stuff that actually happens, or we have no idea if we see from heaven or not. But we will be taken to a place of safety, just like Noah and his family. The day they get in the ark, the day God gets them to safety, judgment comes. The day Lot and his wife get to safety, the judgment comes. The day God takes us out, judgment is going to come. Rider on the white horse is going to go out. I disagree with these prophecy teachers that seem obsessed with trying to stick a large period of time between the rapture and the signing of the 7-year covenant. And I don't know what it is that makes them say, well, we have no idea how long. Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, as it was in the days of Lot. And what does he say? The day they get into the ark, the day they get to safety, judgment comes. The day Lot gets out, the judgment comes. It doesn't mean that the Antichrist is sitting there with the pen ready to sign his name and confirm the covenant, and the rapture happens and he signs his name. There could be hours in there, there could be a few days, but there's not going to be a long period of time between the rapture and the signing of that 7-year covenant. One is going to flow into the other. God takes us out just prior to him judging. Anyways, back to here. That was a little rabbit trail. But back to the description of the beast here and the Antichrist and these different kings. We've got 10 kings that don't have a kingdom as of yet. So likely the Antichrist is going to appoint or give authority to, or Satan himself, right? Satan gives his authority to the first beast in Revelation 13, second beast in Revelation 13. Satan is giving out authority, and authority is going to be given to these 10 kings. So back to verse 12. The 10 kings which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. So it's a short period of time, probably a reference to the second half. Once the 200 million man army from Revelation 9 conquers the world, and we know they conquer the world halfway through. They overrun Jerusalem last, and of course the image has been put into the holy place, and so they come in, overrun Jerusalem, overrun the land of Israel. They've conquered the world. Probably the Antichrist, once he's conquered the world, sets up these 10 individuals. Authority is given to them to rule over the earth. And it says verse 13, these are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. That is a reference to the verse I just read in Revelation 19:11, when Jesus Christ comes back. These individuals Satan gives authority to. The last thing they do is attempt to war with the Lamb. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So John sees the woman and the beast on many waters. That's a reference to the fact it is a worldwide empire. They rule over all nations, tribes, tongues, over all peoples. Verse 16, and the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate, naked, and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Now that's interesting, because initially this woman is ruling over the kings, the city which rules over the kings of the earth. This is Satan's empire. So it's interesting that in the very end of the 7 years, that the 10 kings turn on the city. There's, whether it's jealousy, resentment, hate, but God's going to stir that up. And so the 10 kings are actually going to turn on the city that's been ruling over them in that second half of the tribulation period. And it's a pretty raw description. They're going to burn her with fire. It says, eat her flesh. And it says, verse 17, for God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So let's get back to the identity of the city. We know the fourth kingdom from Daniel 2, from Daniel 7. The fourth kingdom is the Roman Empire. And it's pretty obvious that from Daniel 2 and the feet with the feet of iron and clay is the revived Roman Empire. The same with the fourth beast that we see in Daniel 7, that the revived Roman Empire is the empire that rules the world during the 7 years, because God knows Satan's going to give his authority to the revived Roman Empire. So if the European Union in some shape or form, right, if the European Union is the framework for the revived Roman Empire, one the city, Mystery Babylon, the city that's going to reign over the kings of the earth, is almost certainly going to be within the European Union. And I know, people are, bound to determine it's New York City, and I get it. New York City is wicked. New York City is extremely powerful, and Wall Street's there. Who knows what's going to happen if this new guy gets elected a socialist? I mean, New York City could wind up, being, a big landfill down there within a few years. I mean, we don't know the condition of New York City, but the point is, it's the European Union, it's the revived Roman Empire that rules the world. It's almost certainly going to be a city within the European Union. And again, Rome is the city, that ancient city that was in power when Christ was killed, when the saints were slaughtered. And I think it's probably going to also be the city, and it may have something to do with the Vatican, but where millions upon millions of believers are going to be taken during the 7 years and executed within that city. So it says here and the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now let's go right to chapter 18. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. Now think about that one. So here's an angel, and this isn't just there's a bright light in the sky. This angel it actually illuminates the earth, and makes an official announcement here. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons and a prison for every foul spirit and a cage for every unclean and hateful bird. And all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. Now, during the 7 years, if you remember, under the seal judgments, you've got right around the white horse initially, a false peace, right? The red horse comes out, his power to take peace from the earth. World War III breaks out, and there's war. And then right around the black horse, we've got famine. And then we've got the right of the pale horse, disease and death. So even though there's famine, the food that's available is going to have to be rationed out, which is where, the mark of the beast, where nobody can buy or sell. Food is going to be difficult to get. Now, the rich people, the people of power and influence, they're going, they will still be living in luxury in many cases. They'll have everything they could possibly want. Now, there's going to be pain and suffering throughout these judgments that'll impact even them. But they will have food, and there's still trade going on. Somehow in the middle of all this chaos, there is a network of wealthy people and merchants that are still trading, and they're still buying and selling. Some people are still getting rich, even though, hundreds of millions are dying, billions are dying. And there's still wealth, and there's still plenty for a group of people, the upper 5%, whatever it is. There is still wealth happening during the 7 years. So when Babylon is killed and the city is wiped out, destroyed, there is great lamentation and weeping, and this is the great financial collapse that the Bible has referred to in a number of places. People are talking about it, and yes, we could have a Great Depression tomorrow. We don't, massive, stock exchange crash could happen tomorrow. Absolutely. But the great financial collapse is here. And, Rome, or the Mystery Babylon, is going to be, take center stage again in world affairs during the 7 years. And when it's destroyed, everything goes up in smoke, like within a day. It's like an instantaneous thing. So it says here, all nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Kings of the earth committed fornication with her. Merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you. Repay her double according to her works in the cup which she has mixed double for her. Now, something interesting. As you're reading through that, you should be asking yourself, why does God have to tell his people come out of her? With all that's going on, at this point, the mark of the beast, we're at the end of the 7 years here. So the mark of the beast has been implemented for at least 3 years, probably 3+ years. How would there be any believers in the city of Rome? Well, there's a number of possibilities. If this city, Mystery Babylon, wherever it is, so whether you think it's Rome or New York City, wherever, I don't think that's all that significant. But wherever it is, she's drunk with the blood of the saints. And they've been gathering the saints and gathering the saints wherever they can find. This is a continual thing throughout the second half of the tribulation, hunting down as many Jews as they can get, hunting down as many believers as they can find, people that haven't taken the mark of the beast, and they're funneling them in there. And literally, they may have, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people waiting for execution in the city. And then when this massive earthquake, when the seventh angel pours out its bowl on the earth, and the armies have gathered together to the Middle East to fight against Christ and to try to kill the believing Jews that have been protected there, that just prior to the actual destruction, there's an angelic warning and an actual call for any believers that are there, whether they're waiting execution, if they found a way to hide in the rubble, but God tells them to get out. So that's not going to be here, I don't think, unless there's believers there, right? Why would God say to his children to come out? So there are believers there. Likely they've been taken there to be killed. And those folks that are right there at the end, just prior to destruction, will have an opportunity to flee, and then the city is completely demolished in this particular judgment. So it says, verse 5, for her sins have reached to heaven. God has remembered her iniquities. Render her just as she rendered to you. Repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mixed her double. This is talking about the measure of God's wrath. In the measure that she glorified herself, lived luxuriously. Okay, so even though the world is a disaster at this point, the people of this city have been living in luxury. A good example of this, I don't know how many of you have seen the series The Hunger Games, but that's an interesting portrayal of the city of Babylon, right? In the Hunger Games, you see, the affluence, the wealth, the disgusting debauchery of the people in the capital city, and they've got, gorging themselves with food. And the people out in the districts are barely have enough food to eat. That's going to be the comparison here. This city is a place of luxury, and whatever network they're connected with, they're all still getting rich. The merchants are buying and selling and trading. And by the way, some of these merchant ships may be bringing in people, right? Just like the old slave trade. That's no doubt going to be going on. Anyways, in the measure that she glorified herself, lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in his heart, I sit as queen and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore, merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, marble. It goes down this long list of stuff, spices. It says wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and then get this, and bodies and souls of men. Slave trade. And so when Israel is overrun with a 200 million man army, just prior to the halfway point of the tribulation period, when it's overrun and the Jerusalem is overrun, Many of those Jews are going to be sold into slavery and rescattered around the world, and they'll be regathered after Christ comes back and sets up his kingdom. Verse 14, the fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, alas, alas, that great city which was clothed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. I mean, again, do you see the affluence there? For in 1 hour such great riches has come to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who traveled by ship, sailors, as many as who trade by sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? They threw dust on their heads, cried out, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she's made desolate. Keep in mind also, this trade route that President Trump has been touting. Now, I haven't heard a lot on this the last few months, but he's made reference to this trade route that's going to come from India over through the Middle East, and it's going to split. There's going to be two options: up the Suez Canal, and then out in the Mediterranean Sea. But then they're talking about a new canal. Israel's been talking about a new canal that's going to go through the land of Israel, possibly through the Gaza Strip, into the Mediterranean Sea, and then a land route that's going to come into Saudi Arabia, and then overland by train, by rail. And then President Trump wants to see that come through the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the U.S. He wants to see that as a main trade route. Now, if they get that going, and stuff on this earth is happening like crazy, and they're building these insane cities, Saudi Arabia and these different Arab countries that have a great amount of wealth because of the oil, building cities and all kinds of things. If they get this trade route established through there, that's going to make a whole bunch of places extremely wealthy, but it puts Italy and Rome right in the thick of it, right in the center of that trade route between the nations, and it's going to be the hub, and everything going out past them, out from them, or through them, through that area. So keep your eyes and ears open when it comes to that particular trade route. Anyways, you get the idea here. Complete destruction right near the end of the 7 years, just before Christ sets his feet on the Mount of Olives. Mystery Babylon is wiped out. Verse 21, says here, verse 20. Let's read that one. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Now, you see that? If you like to underline, you should underline that, because that almost certainly pins down Mystery Babylon as Rome. The apostles were not killed in the ancient Babylon. They were not killed in New York City, right? When it says that God has avenged the blood of the apostles, it is on Rome. Rome is the one who slaughtered, crucified Christ, slaughtered the apostles, slaughtered the Christians. And that's why Satan wants to give his power and authority back to the revived Roman Empire, bring them back to world dominance, gives his authority to them, and that's likely going to happen in the near future. And this verse also makes it, I think, very compelling that Mystery Babylon is, in fact, Rome. But again, I think Satan's going to do something in the land of Shinar with this other Old Testament passage, and whether it has something to do with one of these ancient idols, where the human sacrifice, whatever it is, it's evil upon evil, and it's in the land of Shinar. So we're going to see something with that. The world's going to see it. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. Sound of the millstone not heard anymore. Anyways, the light of the lamp. You see complete destruction. Something else I want you to see, the end of verse 23, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And that sorcery, the pharmaceutical drugs, the deception, the witchcraft, it's all tied together. And you know, we see a whole generation that is just so profoundly impacted, and more than one generation, generations profoundly impacted by drugs and what it's doing to them. And now, you know, with the internet, with artificial intelligence, there's deception and stuff all over the internet. It's hard to sort out what's true, what's not true. It says, for by your sorcery all nations were deceived, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints and of all who were slain on the earth. So again, that's a, you know, I believe strongly that Mystery Babylon is the city of Rome, and it's going to play a prominent role in the revived Roman Empire, and it will be Rome itself, probably in partnership with the Vatican, just like it was in the ancient days of Rome, side by side, ruling over the kings of the earth. And so it's destroyed just before Christ sets his feet on the Mount of Olives. You know, the last bowl of God's wrath poured out. Christ is on his way as that's happening. And we'll see, Lord willing, next week in chapter 19, what happens when Christ actually does come back. So thank you for joining us. And Lord willing, we will see you next week. If you like the video, if you find the teaching helpful, share it with somebody. If you know somebody that's interested in the end times, share it